The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of the royal palace. 8-year-old Prince Alexander stood perfectly still beside his father, King William, during the ceremonial changing of the guard. His small hands were clasped behind his back just as his tutor had taught him. The heavy crown on his father's head caught the sunlight, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the stone walls. Alexander had always been fascinated by the palace guards. Their red uniforms were pressed to perfection, their black boots polished until they gleamed like mirrors. Each guard stood motionless like statues carved from stone. Their eyes never wavered, always scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. The young prince often wondered what it would be like to be so brave, so strong, so important. Today was different from other ceremonies. There were more people than usual gathered in the courtyard. Nobles in their finest clothes mingled with foreign diplomats who had come to discuss trade agreements with the kingdom. Alexander recognized some faces from previous state dinners, but many were strangers. His mother, Queen Isabella, had explained that important visitors from neighboring countries would be attending today's ceremony. The head guard, Captain Morrison, was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle smile that he reserved only for the royal family. He had served the kingdom for over 20 years and had watched Alexander grow from a toddling baby into the curious young prince he was today. Morrison often told Alexander stories about his adventures protecting the royal family, carefully leaving out the more dangerous details to avoid frightening the child. As the ceremony began, Alexander noticed someone moving differently in the crowd. While everyone else stood respectfully still, one man kept shifting his position, moving closer to where the royal family stood. The man wore a dark coat that seemed too heavy for the warm morning, and his eyes darted nervously around the courtyard. Something about him made Alexander feel uneasy, though he couldn't quite understand why. The prince had been taught to observe everything around him. His father often said that a good ruler must always be aware of his surroundings and the people in them. Alexander took this lesson seriously, practicing his observation skills during every public event. He noticed how the man's hands kept moving to something hidden inside his coat, and how he seemed to be counting the number of guards positioned around the courtyard. King William was in the middle of his speech about the importance of tradition and honor when Alexander saw the man take another step forward. The stranger was now only a few feet away from the royal platform where the family stood. His hand was reaching inside his coat, and Alexander could see the outline of something metallic, gleaming in the morning light. The young prince felt his heart begin to race. Every instinct told him that something was wrong, that this man posed a threat to his family. But Alexander was just a child. Who would listen to him? What if he was mistaken? What if he caused unnecessary alarm during such an important ceremony? These thoughts raced through his mind as he watched the stranger's hand move slowly toward whatever was hidden in his coat. Alexander looked up at his father, who was still speaking to the crowd, completely unaware of the potential danger approaching. The king's voice was strong and confident as he spoke about the kingdom's bright future and the importance of peace among nations. Queen Isabella stood gracefully beside her husband, occasionally nodding and smiling at the audience. Neither of his parents had noticed the suspicious man. The guards around the courtyard maintained their positions, their eyes scanning the crowd in their usual pattern. But from where Alexander stood, he could see that none of them had spotted the stranger who was now dangerously close to the royal family. The man's behavior was becoming more erratic with each passing moment, and the young prince knew that he had to act quickly. Taking a deep breath, Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He slowly lifted his small hand just slightly, hoping to catch Captain Morrison's attention without alarming the crowd or interrupting his father's speech. The gesture was subtle, barely noticeable to most observers, but Alexander hoped it would be enough to alert the experienced guard to the potential threat. The prince's movement was so small that it might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but Captain Morrison had been trained to watch for even the smallest signs of distress from the royal family. His years of experience had taught him to read body language and detect when something was amiss. The moment he saw the young prince's hand rise slightly, Morrison's attention immediately focused on the boy. Alexander's eyes met those of Captain Morrison, and in that brief moment, the guard understood that the prince had spotted something concerning. Morrison's gaze followed the direction of Alexander's subtle glance. and he immediately saw the man in the dark coat who was now reaching into his jacket with obvious intent. The guard's training kicked in instantly, and he knew that every second counted. The stranger's hand emerged from his coat, revealing the glint of metal that Alexander had spotted earlier. Time seemed to slow down as Morrison realized the full extent of the danger facing the royal family. The man was now only steps away from King William, who continued his speech, completely oblivious to the threat that was rapidly approaching. Morrison's hand moved to his radio to alert the other guards, but he knew there might not be enough time for backup to respond. The safety of the royal family depended on his quick thinking and immediate action. Years of training had prepared him for exactly this type of situation, but the presence of so many innocent civilians in the courtyard complicated his response options. The young prince continued to watch as events unfolded before him, his small heart pounding with fear for his family's safety. He had done everything he could by alerting Captain Morrison, but now he could only hope that his quick thinking and brave action would be enough to prevent disaster. The ceremony that had started as a peaceful celebration was about to become something far more serious, and Alexander realized that his childhood was about to change forever. Captain Morrison moved with the speed and precision that only years of elite training could provide. The moment he confirmed the threat that Prince Alexander had spotted, his body shifted into action mode. Without creating any visible disturbance that might panic the crowd or alert the intruder to his awareness, Morrison began positioning himself for intervention. The stranger in the dark coat was now pulling something from his jacket with deliberate intent. Morrison could see it was a weapon, though he couldn't yet determine exactly what type. The man's eyes were fixed on King William, who continued his speech about the kingdom's commitment to peaceful relations with neighboring countries. The irony of the situation was not lost on Morrison as he prepared to defend against violence during a speech about peace. Morrison pressed a small button on his radio device, sending a silent alert to all guards positioned around the courtyard. This emergency signal would inform them that a code red situation was in progress, without causing audible alarm. The other guards, trained to respond to such signals, would immediately begin moving into defensive positions while maintaining the appearance of normal ceremony protocol. Prince Alexander watched as Captain Morrison began his careful approach toward the threat. The young prince's eyes darted between the guard and the stranger, his small hands now trembling slightly despite his efforts to remain composed. He could see that his father was nearing the end of his speech, which meant the ceremony would soon transition to the traditional inspection of the guard ranks. This would require the king to step down from the platform and move closer to where the dangerous man was positioned. The stranger seemed to be waiting for exactly this moment. His hand was now fully gripped around whatever weapon he had concealed, and his body language suggested he was preparing to act. Morrison realized that time was running out, and he would need to intervene before the king left the relative safety of the elevated platform. Queen Isabella, with her natural grace and social awareness, had begun to sense that something was different about the atmosphere in the courtyard. Though she couldn't identify exactly what was wrong, her maternal instincts were alert to the tension she could feel emanating from her young son. She glanced down at Alexander and noticed his pale complexion and the way his eyes were focused intensely on something in the crowd. Morrison made his decision. Rather than wait for the perfect moment that might never come, he chose to act immediately while he still had the element of surprise. His years of experience had taught him that in situations like this, hesitation could mean the difference between life and death for those he was sworn to protect. The captain began moving through the crowd with purposeful but seemingly casual steps. To most observers, it would appear that he was simply repositioning himself for the next phase of the ceremony. But Morrison's eyes never left the target, and his body was coiled and ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. As Morrison drew closer, he could see more details about the potential weapon. It appeared to be a small device, possibly an explosive or some type of projectile weapon. The stranger's grip on the object was firm, and his knuckles were white with tension. Morrison could also see sweat beading on the man's forehead despite the cool morning air, another clear indicator of his nervous state and malicious intent. The other guards had received Morrison's silent alert and were now subtly repositioning themselves around the courtyard. To the casual observer, it might look like routine security adjustments, but each guard was actually moving into optimal position to respond to various threat scenarios. Some were creating barriers between the crowd and the royal family, while others were preparing to assist Morrison with the immediate threat. Prince Alexander's slight hand movement had set in motion a carefully choreographed response that demonstrated the effectiveness of the royal security system, but the young prince didn't fully understand the complexity of what was happening around him. All he knew was that he had spotted danger and had tried to alert the guards. Now he could only watch and hope that his actions would help keep his family safe. King William's speech was building to its climactic conclusion. His voice rang out clearly across the courtyard as he spoke about the strength that comes from unity and the importance of protecting what is precious. The words seemed prophetic, given the situation that was unfolding just meters away from where he stood. Morrison was now close enough to the stranger to act, but he needed to time his intervention perfectly. If he moved too early, the man might panic and act unpredictably. If he waited too long, the stranger might complete whatever attack he was planning. The captain's training had prepared him for exactly this type of split-second decision-making. But the pressure of protecting the royal family made every calculation more critical. The stranger's hand began to move, bringing the concealed weapon into a position where it could be deployed quickly. Morrison could see that the man was preparing to act within the next few seconds. The captain's muscles tensed as he prepared to launch himself at the threat, knowing that his next actions would determine the safety of everyone in the courtyard. Queen Isabella had moved slightly closer to her son, her protective instincts responding to the tension she could feel building around them. Though she still didn't understand exactly what was happening, she could sense that Prince Alexander was extremely concerned about something, and her trust in her son's perceptiveness made her more alert to potential danger. The moment had arrived. Morrison could see that the stranger was about to reveal his weapon and potentially attack the royal family. With lightning-fast reflexes honed by years of training and experience, Captain Morrison launched himself forward, determined to neutralize the threat before any harm could come to those he had sworn to protect. The peaceful ceremony was about to become a scene of heroic action, and Prince Alexander's brave decision to alert the guards would prove to be the crucial factor in preventing what could have been a devastating attack on the royal family. Captain Morrison's body moved through the air with practiced precision as he launched himself toward the threatening stranger. Years of combat training and countless hours of preparation for exactly this type of scenario guided every muscle as he closed the distance between himself and the potential attacker. The captain's timing was perfect, reaching the man just as the concealed weapon was being brought into attacking position. The impact was swift and decisive. Morrison's shoulder connected with the stranger's midsection, driving him backward and away from the royal family. The mysterious object flew from the man's hand, clattering across the marble courtyard stones and sliding several feet away from both men. The sound of metal against stone echoed through the sudden silence that had fallen over the previously chattering crowd. Prince Alexander watched in amazement as Captain Morrison's training took over completely. The guards' movements were fluid and controlled, designed to neutralize the threat while minimizing risk to innocent bystanders. Within seconds, Morrison had the stranger pinned to the ground, one knee pressed firmly against the man's back, while his hands secured the attacker's arms behind him. The crowd's reaction was immediate but confused. Most of the ceremony attendees had no idea what was happening, or why one of the guards had suddenly tackled a member of the audience. Murmurs of concern and confusion rippled through the gathered nobles and diplomats, but the other guards quickly moved to maintain order and prevent panic from spreading through the courtyard. King William's speech came to an abrupt halt as he turned to see what had caused the commotion. His eyes immediately found Captain Morrison restraining the stranger, and his trained mind quickly assessed the situation. Years of ruling had taught the king to remain calm during unexpected events, and his composure helped prevent the crowd from becoming more agitated. Queen Isabella instinctively moved closer to Prince Alexander, her protective instincts fully activated now that she could see there had indeed been a real threat. She placed a gentle but firm hand on her son's shoulder, both to comfort him and to keep him close to her side. Her eyes met those of her husband, and in that silent exchange, they both acknowledged that their family had just faced serious danger. Morrison's radio crackled to life as other guards reported their positions and confirmed that the immediate area was secure. The captain maintained his grip on the subdued attacker while speaking into his communication device in calm, professional tones. His training had taught him the importance of clear communication during crisis situations, and his steady voice helped coordinate the security response. The object that had fallen from the stranger's hand was now clearly visible to everyone nearby. It was a small explosive device, crude but potentially deadly, if it had been detonated near the royal family. The sight of the weapon confirmed that Morrison's quick action had indeed prevented a serious attack, and the gravity of what could have happened began to sink in among those who could see the device. Prince Alexander stared at the weapon lying on the marble stones, his young mind struggling to process the reality that someone had actually tried to hurt his family. This was not a story from one of his adventure books or a tale told by his tutors about historical events. This was real, and it had happened right in front of him. The 8-year-old prince felt a mixture of fear, confusion, and pride that his alertness had helped prevent disaster. Additional guards arrived quickly to assist Morrison with securing the scene and removing the threat. The bomb disposal team was already on their way to safely handle the explosive device, following protocols that had been established for exactly this type of situation. The efficiency of the response demonstrated the high level of preparation and training that went into protecting the royal family. The stranger offered no resistance as he was lifted to his feet and prepared for transport to the palace security facilities. His dark coat was now torn and dirty from his encounter with Morrison, and his earlier nervous energy had been replaced by defeated resignation. As he was led away, his eyes briefly met those of Prince Alexander, and the young prince saw not the dangerous criminal he had expected, but a sad and confused man whose motivations remained unclear. King William stepped forward to address the crowd, his voice strong and reassuring despite the dramatic interruption to the ceremony. He thanked everyone for their patience and cooperation during the security incident, and praised the quick action of the palace guards in maintaining everyone's safety. His calm leadership helped restore order to what could have become a chaotic situation. Morrison approached the royal family once the immediate threat had been secured and removed from the courtyard. His professional demeanor remained intact, but there was obvious relief in his eyes as he confirmed that all family members were safe and unharmed. He spoke quietly with King William about the incident and the need for enhanced security measures during future public events. The captain then turned his attention to Prince Alexander, kneeling down to bring himself to the young boy's eye level. Morrison's expression was one of genuine respect and gratitude as he looked at the brave little prince who had spotted the danger and found the courage to alert the guards. Without Alexander's quick thinking and observational skills, the outcome of this day could have been very different. The ceremony was officially concluded, and the crowd began to disperse under the careful supervision of the security team. Foreign diplomats and nobles were escorted from the courtyard with additional protection, and arrangements were made to reschedule any meetings that had been planned for later in the day. The priority now was ensuring that everyone involved was safe, and that the full extent of the threat could be properly investigated. As the courtyard gradually emptied, Prince Alexander remained close to his parents, his mind racing with thoughts about what had just happened. He had always known that being part of the royal family came with certain dangers, but experiencing such a direct threat had made those abstract concepts suddenly very real and personal for the young prince. The royal family was quickly escorted to the safety of the palace's private quarters, where they could process what had just happened away from public view. Prince Alexander walked between his parents, still feeling the weight of the morning's events pressing down on his small shoulders. The familiar hallways of the palace, usually filled with warmth and comfort, now seemed different somehow, as if the threat they had just faced had changed the very atmosphere of his home. King William immediately called for an emergency meeting with his security advisors and intelligence officials. The attempted attack raised serious questions about how the stranger had gained access to the ceremony and whether he had been acting alone or as part of a larger conspiracy. The king's primary concern was ensuring the safety of his family and his people, but he also needed to understand how such a breach of security had been possible. Queen Isabella sat with Prince Alexander in the family's private sitting room, her arms wrapped gently around her son as they both tried to make sense of what they had experienced. The Queen's training in diplomacy and crisis management helped her remain calm, but she could see that Alexander was struggling to understand why someone would want to hurt their family. His innocent questions about the attacker's motivations were difficult to answer without causing additional fear or confusion. Captain. Morrison was in the middle of providing his detailed report to the security team when he received word that the royal family wanted to speak with him privately. He understood that Prince Alexander, in particular, deserved an explanation and recognition for his crucial role in preventing the attack. Morrison had worked with the royal family long enough to know that honesty and clear communication would be the best approach, even when dealing with a child. The investigation into the attacker's background had already begun in earnest. Intelligence officers were working to identify the man, determine his motivations, and discover whether he had any accomplices or outside support. The explosive device he had carried was being carefully analyzed to understand its construction and origin, which might provide clues about who had helped him plan the attack. When Morrison arrived at the family's private quarters, he found Prince Alexander sitting quietly beside his mother, his young face showing a mixture of confusion, fear, and curiosity. The captain had dealt with many difficult situations during his career, but explaining violence and danger to a child was always one of the most challenging aspects of his job. He knew that Alexander deserved the truth, but it needed to be presented in a way that wouldn't traumatize the young prince. Morrison began by praising Alexander's exceptional observational skills and quick thinking. He explained that the prince's ability to notice something unusual about the stranger's behavior had been the key factor in preventing what could have been a devastating attack. The captain's words were carefully chosen to help Alexander understand the importance of his actions without dwelling too heavily on the potential consequences if he hadn't acted. The young prince listened intently as Morrison described how security teams train for years to spot exactly the type of suspicious behavior that Alexander had noticed instinctively. The captain explained that the prince's natural awareness and courage had demonstrated qualities that would serve him well as a future leader. Morrison's praise was genuine, and his respect for the 8-year-old's actions was evident in every word. King William joined the conversation, sitting down beside his son and placing a reassuring hand on Alexander's shoulder. The king explained that sometimes there are people in the world who disagree with the decisions that rulers must make, and occasionally those disagreements can lead to dangerous actions. He emphasized that such incidents were rare, but they were also why the royal family had dedicated guards like Captain Morrison to keep them safe. The discussion turned to the importance of trust and communication within the royal household. King William explained that Alexander's decision to alert Captain Morrison, rather than trying to handle the situation himself, had been exactly the right choice. The king emphasized that asking for help when facing something dangerous or confusing was not a sign of weakness, but rather a demonstration of wisdom and good judgment. Queen Isabella contributed to the conversation by helping Alexander understand that his actions had protected not just his own family, but also all the innocent people who had been attending the ceremony. She explained that the stranger's weapon could have hurt many people if it had been used, and that Alexander's alertness had prevented harm to everyone in the courtyard. This broader perspective helped the young prince understand that his courage had had far-reaching positive effects. Morrison took the opportunity to teach Alexander about the security measures that were always in place to protect the royal family, even when they weren't visible to the casual observer. He explained how guards work together as a team, how they communicate with each other, and how they train constantly to be ready for any type of threat. This information helped Alexander feel more secure about his family's safety. The conversation also addressed Alexander's natural curiosity about the attacker's motivations. King William explained that there could be many different reasons why someone might choose to act violently, ranging from mental illness to political extremism to personal grievances. He emphasized that while it was important to try to understand such motivations, it was also crucial to remember that violence was never an acceptable way to express disagreement or resolve conflicts. As the discussion continued, Prince Alexander began to process his emotions more openly. He admitted that he had been frightened during the incident, but also proud that he had been able to help protect his family. Morrison and the king both affirmed that feeling scared in dangerous situations was completely normal and healthy, and that courage wasn't about not being afraid, but about doing the right thing despite being afraid. The family's conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door from one of the security advisors, who needed to brief the king on the preliminary findings of the investigation. The attacker had been identified as a man with a history of mental illness, who had become obsessed with the royal family after losing his job and his home. While this information provided some answers, it also raised new questions about how he had obtained the explosive device and whether he had received help in planning the attack. Before leaving to attend to his royal duties, King William made sure that Alexander understood how proud he was of his son's actions. The king promised that they would continue their conversation later, and that Alexander could ask any questions that occurred to him as he continued to process the day's events. The family's bond had been strengthened by facing danger together and by their open communication about the experience. The investigation into the attack revealed disturbing details about how the troubled man had planned his assault on the royal family. Intelligence officers discovered that he had been studying the palace's public ceremonies for months, learning the routines and timing that would give him the best opportunity to get close to King William. His mental illness had created a dangerous obsession with the royal family, whom he blamed for various personal troubles that had befallen him over the past year. The man's apartment, when searched by authorities, contained detailed drawings of the palace layout, photographs of the royal family cut from newspapers, and a journal filled with confused and angry writings about perceived wrongs he believed the monarchy had committed against him. The explosive device had been constructed using materials purchased over several weeks from different suppliers, showing a level of planning that made his mental state even more concerning to investigators. Prince Alexander spent the rest of that day in the palace's private quarters, trying to return to his normal routine of lessons and play, but finding it difficult to concentrate on anything other than the morning's events. His tutors had been informed about the incident and were prepared to help him process his experience through age-appropriate discussions and activities. They understood that trauma could affect children in unexpected ways, and they wanted to ensure that Alexander received the support he needed. The young prince found himself drawn repeatedly to the windows that overlooked the courtyard where the ceremony had taken place. The marble stones had been cleaned, and there was no visible evidence of the morning's drama, but Alexander could still picture exactly where everything had happened. He could see in his mind the spot where the stranger had stood, the path that Captain Morrison had taken to reach him, and the place where the dangerous weapon had fallen. Queen Isabella noticed her son's preoccupation with the events and decided to engage him in a conversation about heroism and responsibility. She explained that throughout history, many people had found themselves in situations where they needed to make quick decisions to protect others. She told him stories of famous heroes who had shown courage in difficult circumstances, helping Alexander understand that his actions were part of a proud tradition of people who chose to act when others were in danger. The Queen also talked with Alexander about the importance of forgiveness and understanding, even toward people who had tried to cause harm. She explained that the man who had attempted to attack them was sick in his mind, and that while his actions were wrong and dangerous, he was also someone who needed help and treatment rather than hatred. This concept was difficult for the 8-year-old to fully grasp, but it planted important seeds about compassion and justice. Captain Morrison returned to check on the royal family later that afternoon, bringing with him a preliminary security assessment and recommendations for enhanced protection during future public events. He spent additional time with Prince Alexander, answering the boy's many questions about how the security response had unfolded and what would happen to prevent similar incidents in the future. The captain explained that Alexander's actions had been studied by the entire security team as an example of how effective observation and communication could prevent disasters. Morrison told the prince that his alert had given the guards precious seconds that made the difference between a successful intervention and a potential tragedy. This recognition helped Alexander understand the real impact of his quick thinking and brave decision to speak up. King William's emergency meetings with his advisors had resulted in several immediate changes to palace security protocols. Public ceremonies would now include additional screening procedures for attendees. More guards would be positioned throughout event areas, and new communication systems would be implemented to ensure even faster response times if threats were detected. The king was determined to maintain the monarchy's accessibility to the people, while also ensuring the safety of his family and the public. The media coverage of the incident was carefully managed to inform the public about what had happened without causing unnecessary panic or providing detailed information that could help future attackers. The palace's public relations team worked to emphasize the professionalism of the security response, and the fact that no one had been injured during the incident. Prince Alexander's role in preventing the attack was mentioned, but his identity as the one who spotted the threat was kept confidential to protect his privacy. As evening approached, the royal family gathered for dinner in their private dining room, where they could continue processing the day's events in a safe and comfortable environment. The conversation naturally turned to the incident, but also included discussions of normal family topics, helping Alexander begin to integrate his extraordinary experience with his regular life as a young Prince. King William used the dinner conversation as an opportunity to talk with Alexander about the responsibilities that would come with his future role as king. He explained that leaders must always be aware of their surroundings and the people they serve, and that the ability to notice details and communicate effectively were crucial skills for any ruler. The king's words helped Alexander understand that his actions that day had demonstrated important leadership qualities. The family also discussed the importance of the relationship between the monarchy and the people of the kingdom. King William explained that while most citizens were loyal and supportive, there would always be some individuals who disagreed with royal decisions or who might be troubled by personal problems that affected their judgment. Understanding this reality was part of preparing Alexander for his future responsibilities. As a leader, Queen Isabella suggested that they should find a way to honor Captain Morrison and the other guards who had responded so effectively to the crisis. She proposed that a special ceremony be held to recognize their service and dedication, which would also demonstrate to the public that the royal family valued and appreciated those who worked to keep them safe. Alexander enthusiastically supported this idea, wanting to show his gratitude to the brave captain who had acted so quickly on his alert. Before bedtime, Prince Alexander spent some quiet time in his room, looking through books about famous heroes and leaders from history. The stories that had once seemed like exciting adventures now had new meaning for him, as he could better understand the real courage and responsibility involved in protecting others. His experience that day had given him a deeper appreciation for the complexity and importance of leadership. As he prepared for sleep, Alexander reflected on how much he had learned about courage, responsibility, and the importance of speaking up when others were in danger. The day had been frightening and confusing, but it had also shown him that he possessed qualities that could help him become the kind of leader his kingdom would need in the future. The weeks following the attempted attack brought significant changes to life in the royal palace. Security measures were enhanced throughout the grounds, and Prince Alexander noticed the presence of additional guards during his daily activities. While these changes were necessary for safety, his parents worked hard to ensure that the increased security didn't make the young prince feel like a prisoner in his own home. Alexander found himself thinking frequently about the troubled man who had tried to harm his family. The investigation had revealed more details about the attacker's difficult life circumstances, including the loss of his job, his home, and eventually his mental stability. The 8-year-old prince struggled to understand how someone's problems could lead them to want to hurt people they had never met. But these thoughts sparked important conversations with his parents about empathy and social responsibility. Queen Isabella arranged for Alexander to meet with the palace chaplain, who helped the young prince explore his feelings about forgiveness and justice. The chaplain explained that it was possible to feel sorry for someone suffering while still believing that their harmful actions were wrong. This nuanced understanding of human nature was sophisticated for a child Alexander's age, but the chaplain presented these concepts in ways that made sense to the prince's developing moral understanding. Captain Morrison had become something of a hero to Prince Alexander, who now sought out opportunities to learn more about the guard's work and responsibilities. Morrison was happy to share age-appropriate information about security procedures and training, finding that the prince's genuine interest and respect made these conversations both educational and enjoyable. The captain noticed that Alexander's questions showed increasing maturity and thoughtfulness about complex issues. The special ceremony that Queen Isabella had proposed to honor the palace guards was planned for several weeks after the incident. Prince Alexander was given an active role in planning the event, helping to choose the words that would be spoken and the awards that would be presented. This involvement gave him a sense of purpose and agency, transforming him from a victim of circumstances into an active participant in recognizing heroism and service. King William used the incident as a teaching opportunity. incorporating lessons about leadership, security, and public service into Alexander's regular education. The prince's tutors developed new curriculum modules that explored historical examples of leaders who had faced threats and challenges, helping Alexander understand that dealing with danger and conflict was an unfortunate but necessary part of ruling a kingdom. The young prince began to show increased interest in current events and the challenges facing his father's kingdom. He asked more questions about political decisions, social problems, and the difficulties involved in governing a diverse population with many different needs and opinions. His parents were encouraged by this growing awareness and responsibility, seeing signs that their son was developing the thoughtful approach to leadership that would serve him well in the future. Alexander's relationship with his parents deepened as a result of their shared experience of facing danger together. The honest conversations they had about fear, courage, and responsibility created new levels of trust and understanding within the royal family. The prince felt more confident about approaching his parents with questions and concerns, knowing that they would provide honest and thoughtful answers. The investigation into the attack had concluded with the determination that the troubled man had acted alone, driven by his mental illness and personal grievances rather than any organized conspiracy. This finding was both reassuring and sobering, as it confirmed that the threat had been contained while also highlighting the unpredictable nature of such incidents. Security experts used this case study to improve their training and threat assessment procedures. Prince Alexander's tutors noticed positive changes in his academic performance and engagement following the incident. His experience had given him new motivation to learn about history, politics, and social issues that he had previously found abstract or uninteresting. The reality of his future responsibilities as a leader had become more concrete, inspiring him to take his education more seriously. The media attention surrounding the incident gradually faded, but the lessons learned continued to influence the royal family's approach to public engagement and security. King William worked with his advisors to develop new protocols that would maintain the monarchy's accessibility to the people while incorporating the enhanced safety measures that the incident had shown to be necessary. Captain Morrison reported that the security team had implemented several new training exercises based on the scenario they had faced during the ceremony. The guards practiced rapid response procedures and communication protocols, using Alexander's alert as an example of how threats could be identified and reported effectively. The prince's quick thinking had become part of the official training curriculum. Alexander began to understand that his experience had implications beyond his own family's safety. The incident had led to improvements in security procedures that would protect other members of the royal household, visiting dignitaries, and members of the public who attended palace events. This broader perspective helped him appreciate the far-reaching consequences of his observational skills and quick action. The approaching ceremony to honor the palace guards gave Alexander something positive to focus on as he continued to process his emotions about the attack. He worked with his mother to prepare a speech that he would deliver to Captain Morrison and the other guards, expressing his gratitude for their service and dedication. The opportunity to publicly thank his protectors was important to the young prince's sense of closure and recovery. As the date for the ceremony approached, Alexander reflected on how much he had changed since that frightening morning in the courtyard. He felt older and more aware of the complexities of the world around him, but also more confident in his ability to handle difficult situations. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also been educational and transformative, preparing him for the challenges he would face as a future leader. The bond between Prince Alexander and Captain Morrison had grown stronger through their shared experience and subsequent conversations. The guard had become not just a protector but also a mentor, helping the young prince understand the qualities of character and judgment that would be essential to his development as a leader. Morrison's respect for Alexander's actions had created a foundation of mutual admiration that would influence their relationship for years to come. The day of the ceremony to honor the palace guards arrived with beautiful spring weather that seemed to symbolize the renewal and growth that had come from the difficult experience weeks earlier. Prince Alexander woke early, feeling both nervous and excited about his role in recognizing the brave men and women who had protected his family. He had practiced his speech many times with his mother, but this would be his first formal public address, making the occasion both meaningful and challenging. The ceremony was held in the same courtyard where the attack had taken place. A deliberate choice by King William to demonstrate that the royal family would not be intimidated or driven away from their traditions by the actions of one troubled individual. The marble stones gleamed in the morning sunlight, and colorful banners had been hung to create a festive atmosphere that celebrated service and heroism rather than dwelling on the danger that had been prevented. Captain Morrison stood at attention with his fellow guards, wearing his dress uniform with its polished medals and ceremonial decorations. He felt a deep sense of pride not just in his own actions, but in the courage and awareness shown by young Prince Alexander. The captain had served the royal family for many years, but this incident had created a special bond with the prince that he knew would last throughout both of their lives. Queen Isabella watched her son prepare for his speech with a mixture of maternal pride and amazement at how much he had grown and matured since the incident. The 8-year-old boy who had been frightened and confused by the attack had transformed into a young prince who understood the importance of gratitude, courage, and leadership. His character had been tested by difficult circumstances, and he had responded with wisdom beyond his years. King William addressed the gathered crowd first, speaking about the dedication and professionalism of the palace guard and the importance of their service to the kingdom. He praised their quick response during the recent incident and emphasized that their actions had prevented what could have been a tragic outcome. The king's words were formal but heartfelt, setting a tone of genuine appreciation for the guard's sacrifice and commitment. When it was Prince Alexander's turn to speak, he approached the podium with steady steps, his small hands holding the speech he had written with his mother's help. His voice was clear and strong as he began to speak, thanking Captain Morrison and all the guards for keeping his family safe. He spoke about learning the true meaning of courage through watching Morrison act to protect others, even when facing danger. The young prince's speech included his reflection on the importance of observation and communication in preventing problems before they become disasters. He explained how the incident had taught him that everyone has a responsibility to look out for others and to speak up when they notice something wrong. His words demonstrated a maturity of thought that impressed everyone present, including the experienced guards who had seen many royal ceremonies over the years. Alexander presented Captain Morrison with a special medal that had been created specifically for this occasion, recognizing his exceptional service and quick thinking during the crisis. The medal was engraved with words chosen by the prince himself, expressing gratitude for Morrison's protection and dedication. As he placed the medal around the captain's neck, Alexander felt a sense of completion and closure regarding the traumatic events he had experienced. The ceremony also included recognition for all the other guards who had responded to Morrison's alert and helped secure the scene during the incident. Each guard received a commendation for their professionalism and teamwork, acknowledging that the successful resolution of the crisis had been the result of coordinated effort rather than individual heroism alone. This comprehensive recognition reflected the royal family's understanding of how security operations function as a team effort. Following the formal presentations, Prince Alexander had the opportunity to speak privately with Captain Morrison about how the incident had affected both of them. The captain shared his own thoughts about the importance of the prince's quick thinking and mature response to danger. Their conversation reinforced the mutual respect that had developed between them and established a foundation for continued mentorship as Alexander grew older. The ceremony concluded with a reception where the royal family mingled with the guards and their families, creating an atmosphere of warmth and appreciation that extended beyond the formal recognition. Prince Alexander enjoyed meeting the guards' children, some of whom were close to his own age, and learning about their lives outside the palace. These interactions helped him understand that the people who protected his family were themselves parents and community members with their own hopes and concerns. In the weeks that followed the ceremony, Prince Alexander continued to demonstrate the increased maturity and awareness that had resulted from his experience. His tutors reported that he was more engaged in his studies, particularly those related to leadership, history, and social responsibility. The incident had given him a concrete understanding of why his education was important and how the skills he was learning would be essential to his future role. The relationship between the royal family and their security team had been strengthened by the shared experience. and the formal recognition that followed. The guards felt more appreciated and valued, while the royal family had gained deeper insight into the dedication and sacrifice required to maintain their safety. This improved understanding benefited everyone involved and created a more cohesive and effective protection system. Captain Morrison reflected on how the incident had affected his own perspective on his duties and responsibilities. Working with Prince Alexander had reminded him of the personal dimension of his protective role and the real impact that his actions could have on the lives of the people he served. The young prince's courage and awareness had inspired Morrison to continue developing his own skills and to take pride in the important work he performed. Prince Alexander's experience became a defining moment in his young life, teaching him lessons about courage, responsibility, and leadership that would influence his character for years to come. The frightening incident had been transformed through processing, understanding, and formal recognition into a source of strength and wisdom. The 8-year-old prince had faced real danger and had responded with bravery and intelligence, proving to himself and others that he possessed the qualities necessary for future leadership. As life in the palace returned to its normal routines, the memory of that dramatic morning served as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of royal life and the importance of being prepared for unexpected challenges. Prince Alexander carried with him the knowledge that he had made a difference when it mattered most, and that awareness would help shape him into the kind of leader his kingdom would need in the future.